Welcome back to another Triathlon Training Explained, powered by Training Peaks.
Well, this week we are looking at heart rate variability, what it is, how to use it, and most importantly, how it relates to recovery.
As athletes, our main aim is to get stronger and faster, and we do that through a combination of stressing our body through training and then allowing it to rebuild and get stronger through recovery.
Yeah, that's right. But knowing if your body has adequately recovered from the previous training isn't always that easy. But you can use tools such as Training Peaks training stress score. You can use your resting heart rate. Then subjective measures are obviously important. So how you feel, looking at your sleep, the quality and the quantity of it. And all of that helps paint a bigger picture for you to analyse your training for you and your coach.
Well, yeah, those are really useful tools. But then heart rate variability, or better known as HRV for short, is a far more accurate measurement of that overall stress on your body and mind day to day. And most importantly, it's a clear indication of whether you're ready to do hard sessions that next day.
Well, we could explain a little bit more about HRV, but it's probably time we went and heard from an expert. So earlier I spoke to Simon Weggriff, the director of HRV Fit, to ask him exactly what is HRV and how as athletes we can use it to help with our recovery.
Hi Simon, thanks for joining us. If you can start by just telling me what is heart rate variability?
Yeah, sure. So HRV is a relatively new method for assessing the effects of stress on your body. It's actually measured as the time gap between your heartbeats that varies as you breathe in and out. And research evidence increasingly links high HRV to good health and a high level of fitness, whereas decreased HRV is linked to stress, fatigue, and even burnout.
How do you actually measure HRV?
Yeah, sure. So a simple 1-minute measure every morning on waking up can tell you how recovered you are and therefore how hard you can train that day.
Okay. And what tools can you use for that?
Yeah, so typically you would use an app and a sensor, and it's important to use a high quality sensor. So that could be a chest strap or it could be a validated finger sensor.
Okay. And finally, once you've got these results, what are you actually looking for in them?
Yeah, so if your HRV drops significantly, you should take this as an early warning that you're overloading the system. A small drop is okay as long as you recover. Training is, after all, about stress and recovery, and a hard session, especially on top of accumulated fatigue, will lower your HRV. But if your HRV stays low even with rest, you could be on the edge of trouble. Using daily HRV to monitor your training stress is the best thing you can do to make your training both safe and effective.
Well, thank you very much for that, Simon. That was really interesting. It's certainly a very useful tool. Now, I've actually used HRV quite a lot in the past. I understand, Heather, you've been using it a bit as well.
Yeah, I have started to, so I found that really insightful, but I think we should have a bit of a chat about it on our run if you're still up for it.
Yeah, of course. Should we still do that hill rep session, yeah?
I'm not sure I can really do hills today. My heart rate variability is looking a little bit too high. It's in the red, so I think it's just going to be an easy jog for me. Looks like I'm on my own. Well, for the last couple of months, I've been taking my heart rate variability every morning, which basically just involves using this finger sensor, popping it on my index finger on my left hand. And it's all about consistency. So I do it as soon as I get up, sit on the edge of the bed, rest my hand, and I just have to take steady breaths for 55 seconds. And at the end of it, I get a score. And this morning's score is 78, which is a little bit low, and it's come up as red. So that signifies I need to have a slightly easier day.
Oh, hey.
Hey, how was your run?
Yeah, good. I'm just actually uploading it right now, just having a look at my reps.
Oh, cool. I mean, hopefully I'm going to be back in the green tomorrow so I can nail my next session.
Yeah, shame not to have you with me.
Yeah, but I know that you've used it a lot in your training and you know how to listen to your HRV and the bigger picture, but how did you use that when you were planning your training and your recovery?
Yeah, well, actually, the reason I started using HRV in the first place was because I was struggling with my health. I've had glandular fever in the past, and I want to make sure that I don't end up digging that deep, dark hole again. So I started using it in the lead up to Ironman 70.3 South Africa, and I've actually got some really interesting data here. So actually around Christmas time, maybe a few mince pies and drinks were to blame, I'm not sure, but on the 27th of December, I've got a really good example. My HRV dropped really low, and probably ignored that first thing, which was silly of me. I went out and did a run session, and yeah, it didn't feel great in that. I was meant to do a swim that afternoon. I just had to can that. So I semi-listened to it, but at that point, probably a little bit too late. But that meant that I recovered the next day. You can see my HRVs pinged back up. So I kind of nipped it in the butt early and just kind of got rid of it. And yeah, so that was a good example. Another really good example was when I flew out to South Africa. I went out a couple of weeks before the race, and about 3 or 4 days after the flight, HRV dropped again, which isn't totally unusual. That's quite common, but it's just a really good example. It just shows actually this is the effect on the body. This is the stresses from travel, the sleep, and the time difference and all that sort of stuff. I also understand you've been using it then, so talk me through it.
Well, I mean, I must admit, I'm finding it still fairly early, so don't have the, the baseline is maybe still a bit more fluid, but I struggle to listen to it. I think that's my biggest problem. And I've seen the odd red day, but I'm like, oh, it must just be a discrepancy because I've not been that consistent with when I take it. So yeah, it's trying to find out about the bigger picture. But I was actually having a chat with someone called Dan Plews, who has a PhD in the topic, and he also coaches some top pro athletes. And he was mentioning how important it actually is to look at your HRV, but also look at the bigger picture and not just kind of flag out, oh gosh, there's one red day. How else do you feel with that?
I use it during training blocks, more of a chronic way rather than an acute way. Okay. So lots of the devices, they give you like a score on a day, and it'll say you shouldn't train on this day, you should do light training on the day, and that's been proven. There's been a number of studies. There's been another one that's just been brought out by a Spanish group that showed that training based on your day-to-day heart rate variability can be more effective. But personally, I think you could run the risk of missing a session when you don't actually need to if you're just going on HRV alone. Okay. So the way I use it is I would look at basically trends. So what I showed during my PhD is that if you're doing a heavy training block and you're an Ironman triathlete, predominantly you are an endurance-based athlete, most of your training therefore is at a low intensity, you expect it to see HRV kind of increase during that training block, and then it'll come up and it'll come above where you normally would be, and then as you taper down to your competition, it'll come back down to baseline levels, and that's a sign that if it's increasing gradually as you're doing a heavy, hard training block and you're really pushing the limits, that to me is a sign that you're overreaching, but in a functional capacity, not in a detrimental capacity. And that's what I would look for. So if everything's going on and it's increasing gradually, I'll say that's great. That doesn't mean to say though that when HRV is its highest and that person performed on that day, they would have a great race. That wouldn't be the case, and often they can perform very badly. And if you look at a lot of the literature who have done those studies, when the HRV is at the highest, they generally will perform badly. But once they do a bit of a taper, it will come back down to baseline levels, and that's the point where they'll have their peak performance.
Well, that was a great insight there from Dan, and just goes to show that it's a really valuable tool for sort of measuring our stresses from day to day, and in conjunction with some of those other markers to really try and find that balance between training and recovery.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I found it just really interesting looking at this for the last couple of months and seeing those patterns, and I think it's given me the confidence to actually listen to the signs of my body that it's trying to tell me about the overall stresses. And sometimes it just takes seeing an amber or a red on the HRV app to actually say it's okay to back off training for a day or two and come back hard the next day.
Yep, it's all about that consistency. Now if you'd like to see more videos from GTN, just click on the globe and subscribe.
And if you want to get your hands on any of our GTN kit, then just click on the link for the GTN shop. And staying on this topic, if you are interested in a little bit more about recovery and overtraining, we've done another Triathlon Training Explained video on that right here.
Yeah, and if you'd like to see our triathlon versus a pool stroke, basically Mark's stroke versus Heather's stroke, then you can see that by clicking just down here.